The Silent Hill franchise is no stranger to pushing the limits of horror by using elements and ideas that might be too extreme for most developers to include in their games. These ideas can be manifested in the protagonist's history or the town of Silent Hill itself, but if there is one component in the experience that can show you how disturbing the game really is, it has to be the monsters. The reason is because monsters in Silent Hill games were always a reflection of the main character's psyche, suffering, and fears, which ultimately means that their gruesome designs are hiding something very, very terrifying. However, after playing all the main entries, remakes, and spin-offs in the last 2 decades, I can safely say that there are 3 monsters in the whole franchise that somehow felt too unique, and they remain stuck in my memory to this day. In my opinion, these monsters cross the line of entertainment, and it's hard to see them as merely fictional enemies in a video game, but rather as an actual representation of trauma in real life. Anyway, without further ado, let's start. Silent Hill 4 has been in the spotlight in several of my videos, and I explained it thoroughly from start to finish. But for some reason there's a specific monster that I always miss talking about, and even people in general don't focus much on. This monster is not the infamous twin victim or the crazy women in the hospital. It's none other than Bottom, a creature that players usually overlook, even though his design hides something so appalling and uniquely distressing. In case you don't know the game's story, let me remind you that the antagonist here is a serial killer named Walter Sullivan, but his history is what sets him apart from other villains, because his childhood is an absolute tragedy. After his birth, he was abandoned as a baby in an apartment, and his parents left the place and never came back, leaving him alone to face a world he knows nothing about. He was ultimately put in an orphanage run by the Order cult, where he lived a life of mistreatment, neglect, and misery. In order to cope with his suffering, Walter began to believe that he will be reunited with his mother in the future, and this belief became an obsession over time due to the cult's promises and teachings that sold him this hope.
But soon I'll get to see my mom.
Do you know where she is now?
Yeah, of course. Right where I was born.
He had very strong emotions towards room 302. The apartment where he was left alone, and the central setting where the protagonist Henry lives. He had a sense that his mother would be there at some point, and the room was related to her in one way or another. After years of indoctrination from the cult, Walter decided to organize a ritual called 21 Sacraments, in which he needed to murder 21 chosen individuals across the area, hoping that it would help him in meeting with his mother for the first time in his life. However, this hope was only a scenario in his mind that can never become reality, and his dream of reuniting with his mother is impossible to achieve. In fact, after killing multiple people, he was arrested by police and ended up dying in his prison cell through self-deletion, putting an end to his reign of terror in real life and starting another chapter of anguish in the other world.
I got this from Miss Galvin. A long time ago.
Now that you have a clear idea of what the backstory is, it's time to explain to you what the monster Bottom really means, and why his appearance is incredibly deep. First of all, this monster is related to Walter's mother and his own birth. If you focus closely enough on the details, you'll see that this monster has a head in the bottom that seems like it's trying to come out, but remains stuck in a bizarre position. What sent chills down my spine is that this position is not random, and it actually represents something similar to the lithotomy, which is a medical position in which the patient sits on their back with their legs raised and supported. To keep it simple for you, this is a well-known position used in multiple surgical procedures, and the most common procedure for women specifically is giving birth. So the monster Bottom literally resembles a woman's lower half, bound and inverted as if it's in the process of delivering a child, which explains the head coming out below. So in the game's context, this creature is a manifestation of Walter's pain as a child who never met his mother and lived a life where he remained stuck in an endless struggle to reunite with her. It's a reflection of his mother's lower body when she gave birth to him, and the two faceless lumps at the top represent the heads of both parents that he never saw and never had a chance to recognize their faces. I really don't know how to describe my fascination, because it once again proves to me that Silent Hill was always a game made for critical thinkers. And if we're being honest, most players probably never saw these details. It also shows you that in order to really understand the story and its hidden elements, you need to be mature and aware of how the world works beyond the innocent perspective that we have during our youth. I mean, I don't think childbirth and women's positions during that process were stuff that I could easily recognize during my teenage years, but once you get mature enough, so many details in Silent Hill games begin to unravel one by one. Silent Hill 2 is very known in the series for having the deepest lore and symbolism when it comes to characters and monsters, starting from the unstable protagonist James all the way to an ambiguous individual like Eddie Dombrowski. However, despite Pyramid Head being the most popular and recognizable enemy in the game, Abstract Daddy is actually the one that's deeply outlandish and scary for very shocking reasons. What makes him different is that he's not a creation of James's mind or hallucinations, but instead his appearance carries deep psychological and thematic meaning tied primarily to Angela Orozco. Angela is a 19-year-old girl that you meet in a cemetery a few minutes after the game's events begin. She's very innocent in her reactions and the way she speaks, but her shaky voice and sad eyes hide a history of suffering and trauma.
To find my mama.
During her childhood and teenage years, she was treated horribly by her father. But over time, this mistreatment was not only emotional, but it also grew to become physical and intimate. In other words, the man became used to the idea of exploiting her body to satisfy his personal twisted desires, reaching a point where he doesn't see her as a daughter anymore, but rather as a tool he uses for pure intimate pleasure. This horrifying situation intensified further when Angela's brother became involved in her mistreatment, and her mother was intentionally silent and didn't do anything to protect her daughter. Eventually, Angela reached a breaking point where she couldn't take the humiliation and violation anymore, and in a moment of desperation, she grabbed a knife and stabbed her father to death. This is not something you see explicitly in the game, but if you focus a little bit on a certain newspaper snippet you find in your journey, you'll see an article highlighting how the body of Angela's father was found, and how the police concluded that the killer might be a relative. This is actually why Angela went to Silent Hill, because according to the general lore, Silent Hill Town is a place that calls people so they can redeem themselves after facing immense guilt and regret.
Did you find your mother?
No. Not yet.
So in Angela's eyes, the town is basically a purgatory, where her deepest fears and trauma manifest in a nightmarish reality. And this is when Abstract Daddy was born. This creature has a very bizarre shape, showing two human-like figures fused together under a sheet of flesh. The figure on top is bigger and dominant, while the one beneath seems smaller and in a submission position, as if it's being overpowered and forced to stay down. This kind of dynamic evokes the image of a man overpowering or pinning down a woman and forcing her to surrender, which triggers your mind to think about one possible scenario behind this action and design. Long story short, this monster is directly connected to Angela's backstory, and it's a horrifying manifestation of her abuse by her father and her helplessness against him. The bigger figure on top represents her father's dominance over her when he used to pin her down, and the smaller figure represents Angela's devastating position as prey being taken advantage of by a thirsty predator. The sheet-like shape can also be her own bed, especially since it's hinted in the clues you find that her suffering used to take place inside her room, a space that was supposed to be her shelter, but ended up being her prison. Furthermore, according to developers, the original name they chose for the monster was Ideal Father, and it was meant to highlight a dark irony in which the name and the figure itself are a creepy contrast. Fathers are generally a shelter for their daughters and the ultimate source of safety and protection for girls. But for Angela, it's the complete opposite, and her father was her biggest nightmare.
Will you love me? Care for me? Heal all my pain?
Now I want you to step back a little bit and look closely at this monster's appearance, and ask yourself if you have ever encountered anything similar in any other horror game. The answer for me is no, because even if other monsters seem scarier, they don't have such a distressing backstory behind them, especially when this backstory is between a father and his daughter. Even if you focus on his attacks, you'll see how this monster basically tries to catch and choke you, replicating how the father used to behave. This gives us an idea of Angela's agony in Silent Hill Town. And in my opinion, if there was a game where we could play from her perspective as a protagonist, it might be a scarier experience than James's.
Angela. It's okay. Calm down.
Don't order me around!
I'm not. It's okay. It's over.
Don't even try.
Pyramid Head is not ambiguous by any means, and he's probably the most popular enemy in horror games, if not in gaming as a whole. However, the biggest reason behind his iconic legacy is the ideas and emotions he really represents in Silent Hill 2, which are directly related to James. It's not very hard to see that Pyramid Head has a role in the game to punish James for his crime against his wife, which is why he behaves and operates like an executioner who's trying to kill a guilty person. As many of you probably know, James murdered his own wife by smothering her with a pillow in a moment of anger and despair, following a long struggle she went through due to her terminal illness. In James's mind, he killed her because he didn't want to see her suffer anymore due to her disease. But deep down, he knows very well that his selfishness and personal desires played a huge role in his decision. As a result, just after his crime, regret began to dominate his mind, and he felt that his wife didn't deserve to die, leading him to a psychological journey in Silent Hill Town, in which he tried to find peace by believing that his wife is still alive.
Mary?
James! Where are you? I'm waiting. I'm waiting for you. Please, come to me.
Along the way, James encounters various monsters and manifestations that represent something related to his psyche and guilt, but Pyramid Head stands out as the most intriguing one of all. Not necessarily because he's the most powerful, but because he's a reflection of an incredibly disgusting side of James. Besides hunting James down to kill him, Pyramid Head is known for very disturbing behavior in the game, including violence against female monsters, and even forcing himself on them to satisfy his desire for intimacy. He appears to have no remorse for them, and would even kill them if they refuse to let him exploit their bodies for purposes that involve intimacy and affection. Initially, these actions seem too extreme to be relevant to James, but in reality, they're actually an exaggerated manifestation of emotions and sentiments he had during his marriage. The game makes it clear that Mary's disease led her physical and emotional intimacy with her husband to deteriorate entirely, a complete contrast to their life before this tragic transformation. This is not something casual for James to digest, because romance and affection were a huge part of his life with Mary. And you can sense this in Mary's tone when she talks about how much she loves visiting Silent Hill with her beloved husband, James.
I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place.
So the fact that Mary went from a beautiful, energetic woman to a dying patient on a bed was a nightmare for James that resulted in him becoming alcoholic, angry, and feeling like he has no wife to give him love anymore. This is why Maria exists in Silent Hill. She's basically here to be an ideal manifestation of a woman that James wants and needs in his intimate life. But deep down, she's also the embodiment of his lust. However, Pyramid Head's symbolism goes even deeper to show how James was so angry and frustrated with being lonely that he saw his intimate pleasure as more important than anything, even his dying wife. He was secretly ashamed for desiring Mary to be available for him physically and satisfy his needs as a husband, and this shame was converted in Silent Hill Town into an aggressive form of intimacy. The town wants to punish James by showing his repressed emotions in a very extreme manner. And what Pyramid Head does with the female mannequins here highlights something that James thought about in real life, but was hidden inside him all along. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this or not, but if you focus a little bit on the mirrors while investigating the town, you'll find that James's head in the reflection has the shape of a pyramid. This is meant to show you that Pyramid Head is literally the embodiment of James's worst ideas and desires, but in a nightmarish form that makes him feel ashamed and embarrassed. And speaking of shame, this is believed to be the reason why we never see Pyramid Head's face and why it's always concealed under a gigantic mask. It's a representation of James's embarrassment and disgrace regarding what he did to his wife, and his inability to resist his lust as a husband. So in summary, Pyramid Head is the man that James despised in his mind, but still recognizes that this man was born from horrible emotions and ideas he really had. It's also worth mentioning that the idea of men forcing themselves on women was present again in Silent Hill 3, but this time it was meant to highlight the protagonist's fear of them instead of being a source of guilt. The monster in question is none other than Slurper, a creature that seems randomly aggressive at first, but he actually moves and behaves this way for very precise reasons. Slurper's design is incredibly interesting because he has some physical features of a human male with some bizarre components, including a bag-like hood covering his elongated head and his long tongue that he uses for slurping, which is the action of tasting or sucking something with his mouth. He crawls using all fours in a manner similar to crocodiles or lizards in general, making him seem like a sneaky predator who wants to catch his prey off guard. This monster exists because of Heather's fear of becoming pregnant and her paranoia towards stalkers, specifically men who want to approach her for twisted reasons. This is apparent in Slurper's attacks, because he tends to grab Heather by her legs as if he intentionally wants to touch them. And in more intense scenarios, he pins her down to the ground and crawls toward her body to exploit it while she's helpless. On some occasions, he even feels like he's trying to sneak his head under her skirt and impose himself on her to take advantage of her femininity. So Slurper's real purpose is not killing Heather, but it's actually stalking and preying on her for being an isolated girl who can be easily forced into submission and serve as a source of intimate pleasure, which is something she deeply fears. By now, I think you clearly see that Silent Hill monsters were never meant to be easy to understand or simple to examine. Their designs, movements, and behaviors are always meant for a purpose, and this purpose sometimes requires you to be mature to see it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like it, and if you want to support the channel to help us produce more content, you can check out our merch and buy something that you like. The stuff here is very relatable for horror fans, and Silent Hill players will see some recognizable designs that will be very interesting for them, especially in this spooky season. So if you're interested, visit the link in the description, and I hope to see you soon.